We have the distinct pleasure of chatting today on the Everything Financial Radio program with Mr. Jeffrey Tucker. If you're just joining us or have not heard Jeffrey on the program in the past, Jeffrey heads Laissez-Faire Books. He's also the author of It's a Jetsons World, Private Miracles and Public Crimes, as well as a must-read, Bourbon for Breakfast, Living Outside the Status Quo. And Jeffrey, in the last segment, you were starting to make a comment that we really need to start looking at alternatives to the dollar. So let me ask two questions. One, what are viable alternatives, if there are any, given the state of the yen and the euro and other currencies around the world? And two, if Jeffrey Tucker's in charge of monetary policy, what does it look like?
That's funny. Well, I don't think monetary policy should be any different from the policy we have concerning shoes or vegetables or computers or, ice cream. It should be a consumer product. I mean, it should just be made and distributed by the market economy. We chose not to do that 100 years ago by creating the Federal Reserve. As a result, our money is ridiculously old-fashioned. It's old-fashioned. It's a century old. We don't plow our fields with century-old technology. We don't wear century-old clothes. Yet we're using century-old technology and money, and it's really something of a disaster, actually. I mean, the money has fallen apart, and it's basically an antique. This is why I'm very much drawn to some of the wonderful innovations in currencies like cryptographic currencies like Bitcoin, because they actually improve on the monetary system. They change the money relationships we have with each other from being ones of trust to exchanges of real property. And that's what Bitcoin does. We have got serious security problems in our personal finances as a result of the monetary system. And Bitcoin tends to take those away. You know that we experience in the United States alone about 17 million cases a year of identity theft as a result of having hacked together this silly system of credit cards and payments we use on the internet today. It's a highly dangerous situation, and someday we're going to pay a very serious price for this. So it's possible now to start migrating more towards these cryptographic style currencies like Bitcoin, which has just become a kind of new safe haven for many, many investors around the world.
So you mentioned a couple times here, Jeffrey, as we've been chatting today, that this is creating we're going to pay a serious price. It's creating serious problems.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, in your mind, get your crystal ball out. What might that price be, and what might it look like, and how might our listeners be affected?
Well, for one thing, I'm expecting we're going to see a European-style series of bank failures in the future because the banking system as it currently stands, it just had its most profitable quarter in history, but these are not real profits that normal companies make. Their balance sheets are entirely filled with, fake reserves that have just been created by fiat, by the government. It's essentially unsustainable business practices. And to the extent that they're making real profits, they're from a kind of vastly inflated derivative sector, as you said. So, when the yield curve begins to shift, we could see, dramatic bank failures, huge pressure in a whole range of overinflated industries. You can look at all kinds of bubbles in the bond market, in education, in healthcare. They could all come tumbling down very quickly. You don't often know what the bubbles are until after the fact. The Federal Reserve is busy right now trying to figure out if they've got some way to identify bubbles before they, as they're forming and stop them. That's ridiculous. It never works like that. Once you unleash trillions of dollars in fake reserves on a global market like this, it does untold amounts of damage. In terms of price inflation, that's an interesting question because the reason we've not really seen prices respond to the expansion of money is because the loan markets haven't really been fired up. And the reason loan markets are not fired up is because the Fed's keeping interest rates at zero. So if that changes and loan markets get fired up dramatically, we could start seeing this money that's being held in reserves turn into hot money on the streets. And that could create very quickly a great deal of inflationary pressure and an urge to get out of dollars very rapidly. The dollar is already not very strong as an international currency, but we could see that fall really dramatically, hurting millions and millions of people. All Americans will suffer, and then we'll see a turnaround in the unemployment direction, and see it start to skyrocket again. Stock market, people pulling money out of the stock markets. It could be a real mess. In any case, we're playing with fire right now. Bernanke knows this. He's just scared to stop playing because he figures the results will even be worse. He knows that the situation is very bad. Never forget that the main goal of a central banker is not to manage the macroeconomic environment, not to keep unemployment low, not to keep inflation low. Those are all kind of low-level priorities. The number one priority is to keep the banking system together. And they will save that banking system, even if it comes at all of our expense.
So, Jeffrey, you mentioned that we could see some European bank failures, and seems that the policy response or solution to dealing with a bank failure has gone from a government bailout to a bail-in, like we saw in Cyprus, where there was literally outright confiscation of depositors' assets over certain levels. Do you think we see more of that, and to what extent does that trend, if you think we're going to continue to see it, expand to other countries?
I might be wrong about this, but I think that Cyprus situation is something that central bankers around the world learned from that created widespread panic. They don't like widespread panic. So that outright confiscation method is probably far less likely here. I think, instead we're going to see Bernanke take even further recourse to the old-fashioned system of money printing. But, I think it's important for listeners to understand something about Federal Reserve policy. They can't always just accomplish what they want to accomplish. A lot of times the world moves so quickly and it's out of their control. For one thing, they can control bank reserves. They can't really control the spending habits of dollar holders. And that's where it could get very interesting. They think that it's fairly stable right now, but that little statistic called velocity could turn literally on a dime, one day to the next. And then they've got serious problems on their hands.
Jeffrey, comment, if you will, on Japanese monetary policy. Prime Minister Abe has been printing money like a maniac for the last 7 or 8 months, and seems like he's created a little pocket of prosperity. Does Japan implode first? Does Europe implode first? Or does the dollar implode first? There's a whole lot going on.
Yeah, I see it. The first thing that's going to move in the future is going to be Spain. I would expect that that's going to happen before the end of the year, and then comes Italy, and then we're going to face yet another round of European disasters, really. And how bad they are and how far they go, we just don't see. We've seen, many rounds of this, and each time they sort of patch things up a little bit and just buy a little bit more time. But if you look at European economic growth rates, you have really the equivalent of a Great Depression occurring all over Europe already, with no prospects for recovery at all. And something similar has affected Japan. Now, in Japan, you have a kind of a different situation. You've got, deep structural problems. I mean, you've got a kind of you don't really have a normal market economy working in Japan at all anymore. In terms of monetary policy, I don't see inflation, old-fashioned price inflation coming to Japan. I see, just continued stagnation. The U.S., I'm looking at 2, 3, 4 years down the line. I don't expect anything just to happen day after tomorrow. For one thing, we still have a lot of bright pockets of entrepreneurship in the U.S., which ends up saving our bacon in some way. The tech sector is just marvelous what it's done. And in fact, that's, a bright spot in the world economy today. Where we'd be without the technology, it's just, we'd all be in a Great Depression. It would be truly terrible.
So, Jeffrey, you mentioned this as a bright spot in the technology sector. Give us your opinion of the overall economy.
Well, somebody asked me that the other day, and part of the problem is that the Federal Reserve policies are creating illusions all around us. We don't really know what's real and what's not real anymore. This has got investors extremely spooked right now because you don't really know what's in a bubble and what's a genuine form of economic growth taking place right now. But I would say that in technology and web commerce and the web applications, communication technologies, people have been putting these things down for decades, but I see nothing but growth ahead in all forms of digital media, internet, communications technologies, mainly because they're globalized, they're quick, they're lightweight, they're scalable, and those are all kind of features you need to be looking for if you're looking for a place to put your money. The old-fashioned physical world, I'm not very bullish at all about that. I've stopped being bullish on gold. We don't know when it's going to return, but it could come back. But I'm very interested in digital currencies and digital technology generally, and the main reason for that is that it's lightweight enough and quick enough to evade government's attempts to control it. Not completely, but more so than the physical world that the government's worked for 100 years to constantly destroy through taxes and regulations and every other kind of form of intervention.
Well, Jeffrey, certainly a pleasure to have had you on the program today. Certainly hope you'll come back as well. The website, lfb.org, to learn more about Jeffrey's work. And Jeffrey, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's really great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
We'll return after these words. Stay with us.